Welcome to Men's Anonymous, the podcast where men can be vulnerable and open without fear of judgment. Your host, Daniel Weinberg, leads authentic and unfiltered discussions that explore the challenges and triumphs of modern manhood. Join us as we break down barriers, challenge stereotypes, and redefine masculinity. Men's Anonymous, a safe space for men to lower their shields and share their inner world without judgment.
Hi. On this week's show, we have a very close friend of mine, Raul, where we go through the journey of a love addict. Men's Anonymous. And we have liftoff. Raul, welcome to the show.
Thank you, my friend. Happy to be here.
Oh, it's so good to have you. So we're going to talk today about a real fascinating subject, which I haven't really ever come across until, our relationship and friendship became a lot deeper over the years. So before we get into it, let's talk about where are you right now? You're in California?
I live in Hollywood, in Laurel Canyon, California.
And you grew up? Where did you grow up?
I grew up between Minnesota and Panama. My father was in Panama. My mom was in Minnesota.
Okay. So you were a globetrotter very early on.
Yep.
Okay. So we're going to talk today about the subject of love addiction. Okay. Love addiction isn't, according to the authorities, and I'll read here, it says the Diagnostic Manual of Mental Health Disorders doesn't recognize it as a actual mental health disorder. However, many experts feel there's enough evidence to consider it as an independent mental disorder, which makes identifying the condition tricky. So let's start off just with your childhood. So you grew up between Panama and Minnesota. When did you recall your first high school sweetheart or your first love interest? Where did it all get started?
I think so. I want to note that it makes sense why love addiction wouldn't be kind of qualified as particular psychological disorder, but I will say that having gone to both therapists and Sex and Love Anonymous and CODA, which is Codependent Anonymous, you do see a lot of overlap and kind of Venn diagramming of those larger kind of, I don't want to call them issues, but psychological propensities. And I find that interesting that there is often like an overlap. And I think we were talking
when you say overlap, do you mean that the same steps in your head or the same elements of addiction flow through in all these categories? They all have very, very similar characteristics.
I think some similar characteristics and or similar kind of causality. So the thing that like helped to make it, I'm not a psychologist, but I would say that it seems to me that following that thread, there's similar the kind of issue or initial wound, let's say. Okay. There's different ways that people kind of scab over it, right? So maybe it's filled with a sex addiction, maybe it's filled with a codependency, maybe it's filled with a love addiction, but that original wound.
Oh, you're saying the trauma that caused it is very common, you're saying?
It seems to have a quality that is shared by several of those different kind of disorders, or whatever we want to call them. And for me, I think the abandonment one was the big one. So my dad wasn't really present in my childhood. I think was doing his best with having 3 kids and not knowing how to do that. He did a much better job than his father, his grandfather, at raising us, but was very absent. He literally spent my entire childhood like in the basement writing a dictionary, Spanish to English, English to Spanish law dictionary, and working as a lawyer, and was not present. And then my parents got divorced and he left the country. And I basically...
at what age did your parents get divorced?
When I was 11.
Okay,
so I basically had...
pre-11, you don't recall him even being around even when he was at home?
I have random, sporadic, relatively traumatic, either like maybe not great memories. Yes, either kind of violence or intense anger or intense just not being present, mixed in with some really beautiful times of, going canoeing together in the Boundary Waters, or like I remember making shotgun shells together for hunting, and some random nice moments with the family, of course, as anyone does. But I don't actually have a lot of data from before that kind of 11-year-old fissure of him leaving. And I think that event was for me like a big abandonment, distrust. I'm not lovable. I need to step into being the man of the family.
You
as,
were
as a
How old were
boy,
you out of the three siblings?
I was in the middle, and my younger sister, I ended up really did kind of have to come into taking care of her in some capacity. And my older sister left for college right after my parents got divorced. And I changed schools and hit puberty, and all these kind of big, difficult things occurred, which my parents took every effort to support me in that, but I don't think I probably like healed or grieved those wounds as well as I should have. And I think that would be my wound or scar amidst all the rest. I think for me, that was a feeling of like, one, being abandoned, two, not being worthy of love, and three, really not being like welcome. I think that was like a big one for me, was this underlying sense of like, I am not worthy or welcome.
But when he moved to you
Yeah.
used to go visit him when you're in high school?
Yeah.
Or like,
Yeah. I would go and visit him for basically 6 weeks of every year.
and how was it when you visited him?
I loved my family in Panama. They are wonderful and a very tight, supportive unit. My time with my dad was really, really hard until I was I think I was 21, and we got into a big row, and I was playing rugby and had been fighting a lot for fun. Like, I started a fight club in college, and I stood up to him and I was like, let's go. Like, you're bigger than me. You used to beat the shit out of me. I'm going to fuck you up right now.
Right.
And like through tears and like through anger. But I was like, let's actually just do this. So we establish who the fucking alpha monkey is. And from that point on, in a weird way, there was like a mutual respect and understanding as to our roles in relation to each other. And I think that was a really healing moment for us. Like, we were able to start to find a middle ground of compassion. And my relationship with my dad has actually gotten to a really good place through a lot of hardship and also just becoming a man and a father, and understanding how hard it is to be a dad and to sacrifice so much of your freedom and your own personal desires. So I think I like
Did he go on to have another family, more kids, etc.? Or
No, he married his high school sweetheart, who he was best friends with since he was 14 years old. And that was, I think, the catalyst that actually broke up my parents' relationship. But they are happy and in a healthy relationship, which is great. And I'm happy to see that. And I think, like, in the process of, 30 years now of understanding, I get why parents get divorced. I understand, both the ramifications on the children of a family that struggles through divorce, but also the benefits to it as well. So, but I guess I bring that up because I think the formative wound with my father, part of what enabled me to get through this kind of love addiction milieu of the kind of the madness that comes from it, was accepting, understanding, forgiving him and that wound. And I don't think it would have been possible otherwise, to be honest. I think that core scar, without the healing, you just keep trying to salve it, And I'd say, so to answer your question, because I know that was a long-winded review, is like the first time I remember feeling like amorous and love was probably my first serious girlfriend, but I changed to this new school. I was like the cool new kid in class who was from a public school, and I was going to a private school because I was kind of a troublemaker and had some learning disabilities and needed some help. And I was getting a lot of attention. And this one woman named Erin, who I was very fond of, we ended up like kind of dating and falling in love as 12-year-olds, and I think we kissed or something. But then when we were seniors, we ended up getting back together. So 6th grade we dated, and then senior year we ended up like losing our virginities to each other, all those things. But during that high school time, there was a lot. While I was grappling with all those big changes in my life, there were a lot of feelings of love and connection, and kind of I think the difference and what struck you in us initially discussing this on many of our adventures was this idea of like it not being about the sex, but it being about this cultivating this deep feeling and connection of love, which is such like a fruitful and vibrant and like intoxicating thing. And I think for me, it made me feel welcome. It made me feel validated. It made me feel, not the opposite of abandoned, which I guess would just be like seen and loved or worthy. And so I definitely got like addicted to that as the thing to make me okay, to make, whatever shortcomings I felt I had like resolved for the moment. But then you have to keep feeding it. It's like, I think of it as there's this quote of like, feed the good wolf, because we have two different wolves in us. And it was, or like chasing the dragon, people talk about with their addictions. And I think there was definitively that kind of bad wolf or dragon quality to it, where it's insatiable. You can't fill it. You can only feed it. It's like a sacrifice to it. Kind of.
So with that first serious love, which was in your senior year, was it, on reflection, was it just a normal, healthy high school relationship, or were you already, if you think about the way you were in the relationship, did you become obsessive, or or was it just that was just a normal, healthy, loving in your exploration of relationships?
It's so funny, dude, because as you're saying that, it's like that relationship with Erin was actually very healthy, was actually very stable up until the point where senior week, I like blew it up in a very heroic way. But I think, yeah, well, this is what's interesting is like you asked what the first love was, and she was in 6th grade, right? But then I totally fell in love with this woman named Christy and had this whole kind of
in high school
high school. Oh my God. And it was like, I was like super obsessed and jealous, and she went off and dated a senior as I was a freshman. And then he and I got in this gigantic series of literal like fist fights and drama. And the one day my dad ever picked me up from high school, and the entire time the only time I remember him picking up from school, period, was the day that I'd gotten into a proper fucking public fist fight with this senior and was bleeding everywhere and all beat up. Because I'm a pacifist, despite my enjoying fighting or wrestling. The intention is not to hurt. It's really just to test. And this guy, I let him just like beat the shit out of me while telling him how I'm sorry his dad used to beat him up, which I knew because he was dating Christy. But point being, like, there was all these crazy interwoven relationships that I had gotten myself into before I got back together with Erin, the original love. So it was like, and I really like got into a lot of drama even before I got back together with Erin. And I think that us being able to come back together, and we're still very, very good friends, was like in her seeing me and accepting me and like loving me for who I am at my core, which I think is a really like good, loving person, which she like understood because we had been friends. And I'd say that's like a commonality with the people that I've been able to retain really healthy relationships with after, despite having. So the reason my relationship ended with Erin is that Christy, the drama relationship, as I'm leaving for college, she came back into my life, and like, kind of a drug fueled senior party, and we ended up hooking up. And then of course it got back to Aaron, and then of course it was this huge explosive disaster. But there were always magical things kind of bringing me back to the people that were healthy in my life. Like I remember Aaron and I didn't speak our entire first year of college, and then came back to Minnesota, and we're like, hey, let's take a walk. And we went on a walk to a place that we used to be like just hike. And this dude emerged out of the woods, and he was like, you guys stay right there. I have a gift. I have something that I found that's for you. Right? There's some random like leprechaun came out of the woods. We're like, okay, cool. And he goes into the woods and comes out with a 4-leaf clover. And he's like, I saw this and it is for you. And like gave us, and we were both like, what the? And then, she still has that in a locket. We've been best friends ever since. We did kind of get back together and then realize it wasn't a thing. But there were always like these weird kind of signs from the universe as to the people to keep around. And then the other people who were toxic, which I will say there's a lot of toxicity around this kind of love addiction behavior. Things get really fucking messy and destructive and
this is some of the other stuff.
crazy.
There's some of the other stuff I read about, which was what they say here is the behaviors of people who are feeling lost or uprooted without a partner, feeling over dependent on the partner.
Yeah. Codependence. Yeah.
Prioritizing the relationship with a partner over family and friends.
Or work.
Becoming depressed and obsessed with a love interest when romantic advances aren't reciprocated.
Yep.
Constantly seeking romantic relationships regardless of quality.
Absolutely.
Feeling despondent without a romantic partner or relationship.
Yep.
Having difficulty leaving unhealthy or toxic relationships.
Definitely. I could check all these.
Making poor decisions based on emotions felt towards a partner or love interest. Example, quitting a job or cutting ties with family.
Absolutely.
Obsessively thinking of the other person to the point of disruption. So when I say all those things to you, they all resonate.
Absolutely. I would check like all those boxes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it's like you're addicted. There's like an actual drug that is, I can't remember what it is as far as what's happening in your brain or the chemicals being released, oxytocin or whatnot. But it's like you are getting hit and you need that hit because that wound otherwise is like this gaping chasm that is, seemingly insurmountable. And I would agree with all of those things. I've done all of those things to the point where I'm like destroying my relationships. And, I think what's interesting is I've shared this with you, and it's why I'm not afraid of having my name here is that, I really have done some things that I regret. And I've hurt some people that really deserved nothing but unconditional love. And I think what's interesting is that so much of the time it was coming from a deep place of love. Like it was actually, how do I say this? It's like there was no maliciousness or ill intent. And yet my behaviors in no way reflected that. My behaviors were of like a crazy person acting completely out of integrity in a very callous and sometimes like cruel way. Some of the stuff I would do, I'd be like, whoa, like, what the fuck? I have such a problem. Like, and you're like aware of the problem, but then
You are aware of the problem.
yeah, no, I mean, I initially, I don't think.
Let's take a step back because I want to go on the chronology and just want to let the audience know as well that the Raul of today is Raul's come like
Full circle.
Full circle is in a very, very healthy, mono committed family. You have a family and you're, just very stable, consistent. Whatever. So you've really, you've gone through a very big journey here and obviously have come through. which is amazing. So I want to take the audience on the journey. So would you say, when's the first time you had your heart broken? Do you recall who broke your heart the first time?
Yeah, it was actually that girl, Christy, the one
in
that I
high
kind of
school.
got back. Yeah, it was like the Aaron and Christy show was a whole thing. And I was very much infatuated with Christy and had been for years. And then I went to Oxford to study film, and we were trying to do long distance. And there was this amazing, beautiful woman. I was playing Romeo. She was playing Juliet. That kind of played itself out. I realized, like literally in a film we were making,
Production.
an 8mm, and I was like, wow, this woman is like brilliant and beautiful and wealthy and radical and cool, and kind of got caught up in that. And I remember kissing her and then being like, what am I doing? I have a girlfriend that I'm in love with. And then I went home and felt horrible about it, and then told Christy immediately. I was like, I'm so sorry. I accidentally like kissed this girl, but like, I'm in love with you, and I won't pursue that. And there's a lot of beautiful people here, but I'm with you. And then she like made me feel absolutely like the most horrible human on the face of the planet. I found out after I got back, after a month. So this sent me into like a deep depression, Daniel. Literally, this catalyst was like, I'm not kidding you. I think I lost 20 pounds. I couldn't eat for weeks. I became very emaciated. I should show you a photo. It's like, I actually got really, really sick. And I used to struggle with
lovesick.
Lovesick, but I used to struggle with depression when I was in high school, like pretty intensely. I was on like lots of different meds, and some of them would make me really fat. Some of them would make me really sleepy. Some of them would make me really erratic and crazy. And I lost a lot of weight, got really sick, couldn't eat, was super depressed, like would cry like half the day. Like I was a disaster actually. And making this Romeo and Juliet and like, and you know, all this stuff. And then hated the woman who had became Juliet because she had like caused me to destroy this relationship.
Right.
Yeah. And so I find out after I get back from this trip that the whole time Christy had been fucking a friend of mine and just had failed to mention that. So that when I had told her the truth, she was omitting her truth, which was ironic considering the journey I'd been down. But also I think it taught me a lot about like, yeah, I guess how much is at stake and how real those feelings are and how obsessive and overpowering they can become.
So let's go back to the actual, when your heart's broken for the first time, that's always a
well, I had broken it. I had broken my own heart, right? I had made the behavior. Yeah, it wasn't her fault that I had kissed somebody else. I had done it, right? And I think that was a theme a lot of times in the heartbreak that I experienced, where something I had either done or allowed to happen was the reason for my like sadness. And I think that's kind of interesting in and of itself, right? Where it's like a self-inflicted wound. And part of what you get addicted to with, I think, a love addiction is the drama. I think it's important to mention that, like the drama, the like somebody pulling away and then having to get them back. Like this like push and pull is an important and particularly toxic and destructive aspect of it. Because the moment you feel yourself alone and without that kind of like
what I was talking about before, when feeling like you're lacking is when you're getting a bit more crazy, a bit more obsessive about it, about filling that hole. It's like
filling that void.
It's like you have a big void that you think you need to fill with someone who you're able to give love to. With reciprocity, with I will give you love, but you need to give it back to me. You need to keep
absolutely
basically.
And I would say that when the quality of that, where it gets really crazy, is when the quality of that love becomes less pronounced or potent. When it becomes less potent, you need more sources. So as my addiction,
constantly seeking romantic relationships regardless of quality. That's what it says here. What you're saying here is when the quality dropped of that love,
you need more of it.
that's when, okay, so
You start having
that's
more
when
partners.
when you morphed into, okay, I think I can manage more than one of these at the same time. So if I think about, I'm 50 years old, and I
Yeah.
think about how many, like, let's call it love interest, not physical without love relationships, but let's call it love interest. My intuition tells me that most people experience somewhere between low to high single digits of love
Mm-hmm.
interest in their whole life. Maybe 3 to 5 people that you can say, "Oh, I was really in love with that person," and I had a very serious relationship in high school, then one in
Yeah, yeah.
college, and it's maybe 5 or something. You found yourself in
There would be like five a
situations
year.
or
Like five a
years
year.
or years where
Yeah.
you were running 5
Yeah.
romantic, loving relationships, where
Yeah.
you're running a series with 5 at the same time
And I'm
across states, across different
across the
in the
globe.
US.
Yeah.
They were living in different states, and they had no idea about each other, yet you were
Mm-hmm.
having these very deep, meaningful, loving, deeply connected relationships. I want you to walk the audience through, how are you managing your life, and how are you giving yourself to each of these individuals over long periods of time, with geographical distance, and having, like, I think most people find being in one relationship is a very heavy load in itself, in the communication, in the,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in actually interacting, whether you're talking on the phone with technology, or whether you're actually physically hanging out with each other,
Yep.
or needing to do this with multiple women, and them not being aware, and you're also running your life, you're going to gym,
Yeah.
and you've got a job, and you've got friends and family. Talk us through it. How are you doing that?
Yeah. Well, so I think it's important to note that, like, for me, it wasn't a sex addiction. Like, I actually had to think that I was in love with the person to fill the wound. So, like, the sex wasn't the thing. And I remember in college, I got a lot of attention. I was like a new, pretty handsome, sporty kid and got a lot of attention. And for me, the rule, like, I didn't lose my virginity till senior year with intention, where I was like, no, like, I want to be in love when I have sex. And I took that same rule to college, where I saw people just hooking up and having fun. And I was like, that doesn't feed it for me. Like, I need to feel a deep connection. I need to feel a deep love. And I think it's an important distinction to make, because I think they get easily confused.
Yeah, well, in order to have a deep connection of love, that
It
that
takes a lot of time.
only
It takes a lot of
happens
energy.
a lot of time,
It's not
effort, energy. It's like you really need to
and
connect
it's, and,
deep
yeah,
with
and
each
you have
other.
to, yeah, you have to feel it from both sides too. It's like, you have to feel the love for somebody. Somebody else has to feel that love for you. You have to cultivate it together. It's often tied up with that, like, magical quality of, an experience. But yeah, so point being, like, I would say that through college, I had a series of really beautiful, super potent, very committed, because I had felt bad about cheating on my girlfriend in high school, really working to, and, like, making it so difficult on myself, Daniel. I beat myself up sometimes, where I'm like, damn, I could have just had so much more fun. Like, there were so many times where I could have just had so much more fun. I could have fucked so many more beautiful women. I could have just focused on one instead of having, you know, several later in life. But I'd say, like, my college years, I was super focused on just trying to be with one person at a time. Often I'd be like, hey, I'm calling this off because I found somebody else that I'm interested in. But I really wasn't trying to, like, overlap. And then by the end of my college years, it got really fucking messy, of a lot of overlap in a small school.
Tell us how. When did it change? When did it go from, I'm
I
just
think
gonna
when I
I'm just gonna be
yeah,
in a monogamous, very deep, loving relationship, and I'm just filling that void, and it's like it's filling me up.
Well, keep in mind, I wasn't
it,
aware of the problem at this point. I
no,
wasn't
I know,
aware that there was an issue.
I'm aware.
Yeah.
But when did it become this is not enough? I need more. I need more of this. And at the same time, and then I want to understand, how did you rationalize, and given how you felt about about the cheating component, how did you go from that to I'm running 5 relationships at the same time, and in your head, I'm not really cheating over here?
Oh, I think at that point I knew I was doing something very bad. So yes, but
not bad enough.
When did it happen?
Not bad enough that you didn't. It continued for years.
Doesn't matter, man. If you're addicted to something, it doesn't matter if it's bad. If it's making you feel better, if it's filling that void, that's the most toxic, gnarly part about it, is realizing where you're like, oh fuck, I'm like hurting people, and I'm definitively hurting myself, and my work is suffering, and my relationships are suffering. I mean, I've lost like whole groups of friends as a result of some of the dumb ass shit that I did in my 30s in particular, where, I was like engaged with a woman, and I didn't get engaged until well, that one's complicated because it like started and it was like very serious and had a ton of potential, but I had been kind of running game on a bunch of stuff and didn't properly detangle to like actually focus, and then actually didn't disentangle and spent 3 months very much alone working on myself, and then came back together and got engaged. But she wasn't able to get past the fact that I had wronged her earlier on in the relationship. I actually didn't cheat on her after the first 3 months of our relationship, but it didn't matter because that wound for her was so very fairly, that she was unable to forgive me and understand. And I get that.
How many times have you been engaged?
Just once.
Okay. I imagine the other thing that's coming to, I've got so many questions in my head. Yeah, because it's like, it's exhausting even listening to how you even did this for a week or a day, to be honest. The other thing I want to ask is social media.
So it never was on social. There were no socials. There were no dating apps. There was nothing. Like, this is like deep connections that are, you see somebody from across the room, there's clearly a connection, whether that's room, quote unquote. And there is a magic there. There's a spark that you're looking for. It's quite literally like you can almost see like a shimmer of like rainbow light, and that's what you're following, know? Yeah. And I think, to answer your question of
unicorns, rainbows, fairies. Yeah.
It literally, fully. And I will say, like, I don't know exactly when I realized that it wasn't enough to have one, but I think there was something that happened in college, and I don't remember what it was, but I just remember being like, hold on, everybody's having fun and doing their thing. And like, I get a lot of attention. Why don't I just have fun? Like, why don't I just do this like everybody else is doing it? Like, sex doesn't have to be that big of a deal in a weird way. It's a very human compulsion. And I think to answer your question, I'm a super ADHD person that's pretty high functioning. For me, it led to a lot of mania, like quite literally when you say mania, like I was manic. So
explain.
There were years,
how does that
there were years of my life. And really what brought me to like getting better was just how destructive that became, quite literally for every aspect of my life. But it got to the point where I was like, and my partner now knows all of this. I've shared this with her. And I think that was something for us to overcome in becoming more of a committed relationship, and something that I was unable to do with my ex-fiance or that degree of understanding and acceptance. But like, I literally got to the point where I am drugged up on these different relationships. There's a person in New York. There's a person in Russia. There's a person in Bali. There's a person in Minnesota. And you're juggling all these things.
How did you explain to each one, like the mechanics, the logistics, the balance?
No, just imagine you're always on your phone. You're always like, you could ask. I was like,
when you're with them, when you're with one of them,
and you're texting other people,
isn't there income from other people?
Yep, totally.
When are we meeting? Like,
Yeah.
how are you explain, oh, I'm just got to go here now, and then I'm going there, and oh, I'm not available right now. Oh, I won't have my phone, or like, how are you keeping all those stories aligned?
And that's what's crazy is like the ADHD. There's a high functioning part of my brain that's able to compartmentalize data. That's why I'm a good director from a variety of sources and people. But there would definitely come times where it got too crazy, and I was like, "Oh, did I do this with that person, or did I do that with the other person?" Or I'd say something, they'd be like, "You haven't told me that before," and I was like, "Fuck!" Like the stories started to Venn diagram and get really fucking messy.
So what happened?
And
Is there incidents where you got exposed? You must have.
oh, definitely, yeah, absolutely.
What I want to ask is, while this is happening, I'm assuming you've got some good male friends in your life.
That are worried about me.
So were they aware of the game you were running?
Definitely.
How much did you expose yourself to your mother or your sisters or your close friends, or who was in the inner circle allowed to know what was truly going on, or do you cover most of it up?
I think my family was aware because I would always have a different girl back to Minnesota.
But would you tell them, hey guys, don't talk about Mary?
Yeah, sometimes.
I'm bringing Jane, and she doesn't know anything about Teresa.
Well, and it's like, and all those would have been done. It's like that relationship's done. The next summer, I'm bringing somebody else home. And I had, long-term relationships in there too. Like there was a partner for several years. Basically, there were like, over the course of that period, three-year monogamous relationships that I was fully monogamous. I didn't cheat on them. I didn't fuck anything up. I was very committed and very much in
with
love.
any other women at the same time?
Not at all. So there were periods that was like 27 to 30, 31 to 34 to 36, like long.
And then you swayed in between those gaps.
And there were, and all the other stuff that happens too, where you're trying to have a long distance relationship with somebody you're in love with, and you find out they're cheating on you, and then you're like, well, I can't really blame them for doing that because I've done that. I understand what that is, and I'm heartbroken, and I don't trust them. And what do I do with that information? Because I've also done that. I think like all the normal things that occur in relationships also concurrently exist. But I think for me, I was happy in those committed relationships. I actually really like being in a committed, healthy relationship more than the drama. But I will say when it got really bad, there was and that was for several years, I was like fully certifiably manic, man. Like I was like all over the place, like on the verge of a nervous breakdown, holding way too many.
What does that mean?
Like literally mania. So your emotional field is like on a wave, dependent upon how these different relationships are going. Nothing matters more than keeping up the game. So like I would be destroying
every other element of your life gets
completely fucking up big jobs and focused on the drama of a relationship when I should be focused on, directing a set, or big projects basically just exploding because I'm a complete and total fucking disaster. And to answer your question about friends, like there were a bunch of friends that I was very honest, like my brothers, and a couple of women in my life that I had dated and realized I was struggling with this, that I was able to be very, very candid with. And I think was a mix of like, this isn't okay and you need to fucking figure it out. And like, this is human and you're not alone. Like a lot of, several of my best guy buddies also either literally alcohol or drugs or sex and love addiction. And most of them were sex addiction instead of love addiction. I think in that commonality also came a lot of healing where it's like, oh yeah, I'm not alone in this. This is something that people are struggling with. And so for like a decade, dude, it was all over. And I was, my life was crazy. I was like a pretty successful dude going between New York and LA, living entirely separate lives, like 2 weeks in New York, 2 weeks in LA for years, bro. So it's like,
you'd have, let's say, in each place. And I mean, I always find the world a lot smaller than what you think it is. So like, if you're with your partner in New York, aren't you going to be bumping into people who know your partner in
Exactly,
LA? And
dude.
how
Especially
how
the
did
small. Yeah.
you like? Surely you would have been like looking over your shoulder and saying paranoid and neurotic. Doesn't that stuff?
Yeah. No,
Well,
that's what I mean. Like fully. Yeah. No. That is all happening, and it is overlapping. And then the drama of somebody finding out about somebody through friends, and then you're like this horrible fucking asshole that is doing something horrible and asinine, and then you're getting called out on it, and then you're losing those friends, and then you're losing that relationship, and then both of it's like that happened many times where I was a fucking piece of shit, and then you go down the spiral of being like, oh, I'm a fucking asshole, which I really did act like out of integrity, like an asshole, and then the shame spiral.
yes.
And I would say like that's actually a really important aspect to this to
Yeah.
mention. It's like the shame spiral that occurs as a result of your behaviors that are tied to this addiction.
When this stuff happens, you're not an American Psycho where you're like, oh, fuck
No,
them.
no,
Or
no,
like,
no, no.
no, you
No,
like, you
you're
really feel like, oh my God, I've caused a lot of people a lot of pain here.
yeah,
You feel terrible
you
about
love
yourself.
and yeah, there's a lot of love there too, and you've completely. I think the hard part about any of these things is like when you feel deep, resonant love, that is a rich and rare thing.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So when you've wounded that, you've hurt somebody that you actually really cared about and had love for you. You've lost that love. And more importantly, it's forever tarnished. So even all the beautiful things you shared are still there. All of the qualities that you've spent so long cultivating are basically like dead. Like they go from like alive and vibrant and full of potential to like a fucking unconscious, broken vessel that even when you try to fill, like my ex fiance, like I spent years, dude, trying so hard to make up for the stupid mistakes I'd made and told her about. I was very honest with her. That's my other problem is I'm like obscenely honest, despite often acting out of integrity and being dishonest. So like my compulsion is to be of good nature and yet often acting out of integrity. So it became this weird shame spiral of like, okay, well, the thing that was making me okay and feeding the wolf is now gone. So I need to find a new thing to fill the wolf. And this idea of like just not being a quality of connection when I would lose the main partner that was a committed, awesome thing, which were always heartbreaking. Like, and I would be depressed and actually very heartbroken, like coming out of those big relationships because I really wanted to make them work. Then I would go into the spiral. So I'd be in a committed, healthy relationship that would fall apart for one reason or another, not because of me cheating, just because they'd fallen apart. And then I would go into like, well, there's 5 things that fill that one person's void because they're not as intense of quality. So that's where I started to get into the real messy disaster. And I wanted to have kids and I wanted to be in a healthy relationship and I wanted to get married. And so you're still searching and kind of hunting, quite literally, like I think of it kind of like a wolf hunting. Yeah, for me, the big catalyst, Daniel, was like, because that just went on for years. I'm manic. I'm kind of a disaster. I kind of had a nervous breakdown. I went and took a sabbatical in New York. Was with an amazing woman who I'd met right before I went to New York and found myself in the city of like, you can kind of, New York, you can do a lot and have a lot of fun if you want to. And I was like, super happy being with this amazing woman who I met that I would see every week or two. And that was a 3-year relationship that also got very messy at the end. But for a long time, I was like in New York and could have been having a blast and was like, no, I feel good. I love this person. She loves me. Like, that's actually all I really want. The sex is epic. Like, let's not compromise that. But that got kind of like messy at the end because I was a mess. And to the point where it was like, I was kind of in love with 2 people at the same time, clearly hooking up with both of them at the same time. They lived 2 blocks away from each other in Venice, which is a super small fucking town. And I basically was going to Sundance for my movie. And like, they both wanted to come to Sundance. And I was like, wow, okay, neither of you guys can come to Sundance. And one of them was like super slow and grounded. The other was like all hyper and madness. And I couldn't decide. I literally was like, I can't decide between these 2. They knew about each other, oddly enough. because I was still trying to be super honest and forthcoming. So it wasn't like they weren't aware of each other, but I don't think they were aware of how intense the relationships had gotten. And I went snowboarding early in the morning. I remember the night before I had felt like a fucking rock star, dude. I'm wearing like all this, like just dripping and cool, and like got all my friends into the hardest party, and like was like, peace guys, love you. I'm going to go ski in the morning. Played it sober, woke up at 8 a.m. with a producer. I'm going down powder. I've told you this story, but I basically just like exactly what I'm talking about. Like one person was like one track I was taking, which was like on the corduroy, fast and fearless. And then the other is like in the trees where you shouldn't be going as fast. And I was just going between them. And I hit a tree like that sent me flying at 30 miles an hour, or I hit a limb or something that sent me flying like off of a cliff into a tree. And I pulverized my pelvis and nearly died, and spent 6 months not being able to walk, and literally like have a titanium core and fully almost passed. I had a near death experience. And all of that brought me to like this big awareness of like, oh, dude, like you have to decide on a path, man. You have to like choose if you're going to go slow or fast. This back and forth is just going to kill you, like literally going to kill you. And for me, that was like the big download from that experience, was like, no, you've caused so much pain in the world, despite you've cultivated a lot of love too for all these people. Like you've shown and shared great experiences, but like they have ended tarnished in pain. And now it is your turn
The
to
universe
feel.
basically decided, I got to let you know what real, true physical pain feels like.
And what you're doing.
You-
Yeah.
you-
Sit with it.
For you to wake up and feel, and and just like namaste.
And
Take a little breather here and rethink what you want to do, because you're going to now need to rebuild yourself physically, but you're also going to need to rebuild yourself emotionally, mentally. So
yeah.
was that the trigger in seeking therapy, or did family, who made you go and say, listen, you have got a serious problem? Did it come from you, or did it come from another?
No,
I'm going to go to therapy, or I need to go to, Love Addicts Anonymous. Like, explain how that whole
Yeah, no,
works.
and I'd already been to Love Addicts Anonymous. I'd done that. I had some friends that were.
Explain. Wait. Take it a step. What made you go? What made you? When did you realize I do have a problem? And so
I'd already. So this is what's crazy, dude. Yeah.
I'm going to try some of these things.
No, and I'd already done that. I'd already been to Sex and Love Anonymous. I'd already
That
been.
work. Explain what that is. I don't think anyone in my audience.
Yeah, no, it's literally like AA.
Explain.
So you're going to a gathering of people with a shared kind of experience or ailment to talk about your own struggles with sex and love addiction. They're actually like kind of paired in, and for me, I had trouble with it because so much of it was about sex addiction, which isn't my thing as much, but obviously plays in because you're having sex with people that you love. So it is all tied together. I would say it's not fair to say they're different, but I'd already gone to many of those. That was its own thing. Like I was aware of the problem. I was able to vocalize the problem.
Did they help you at all?
I think getting a new therapist definitely really helped me in the last probably 4 years. But I think what's difficult about this, Daniel, and what's hard to like accept and acknowledge is that I was aware of the problem for many years. I was trying to work on it, and then I was just falling back into it. And that whole time, I'm like aware, trying to do what is right. I'm literally being very honest. There were so many times where I was like in these relationships where it wasn't like they weren't aware of what was happening. I was trying to speak my truth, to make sure I'm not going to hurt somebody. And yet I want the thing I want, which is the connection.
You tell them I'm a love addict. You tell them.
There were definitely relationships where I did.
Starting relationships with women. So I just need you to know, like, I have a love addiction problem.
Totally.
And how was that? And how did they respond to that? Or do they not?
I think often it's like something you're trying to fix. I think we all, like I used to date women who had eating disorders. It's like, well, I can help with that. I can be there for you, And I will say, I think a lot of the people that are drawn to each other in this like intensity have something else that they're struggling with, right? So it's like two stable people do not often come together in a super toxic dynamic. You know what I mean?
And so a lot of the partners you had, they are also
We're struggling with their own
have something that they. Is there a common theme?
No, I think it was.
Or what were the commonalities?
I think like some drug addictions or addictions of one variety. I think all addictions. I would say addictions because an eating disorder is an addiction.
Yep.
Alcohol or drugs are an addiction. Love's an addiction. Sex. I mean, I definitely met and didn't really get too serious with, but sex addicts like that. All those things are real. And I think I actually fell for a couple of love addicts too, where we were just like in the fucking madness together. But I will say, like for me, what was interesting was hitting this tree, being like, wow, I actually really have a problem. Working so hard on myself and that relationship, I kind of chose one of those people. And she was super supportive and lovely and amazing and deserved nothing but all of my love and affection. And then I still kind of went back to being a disaster, to being like, and I was like, hold on, I've already gotten this lesson. Like, this is actually going to kill me. And I remember some of my friends who I would share this stuff with being like, dude, this will actually like kill you. It is going to, you can't keep doing it. Cause you're just spreading disease, you know, not literal disease, like no sexually transmitted disease. You're spreading dis-ease. And,
Right. Yeah.
and for me, I went through another circle of having two people that were way too close. And then another circle of having to, and getting called and caught. And like, and you're putting yourself into ridiculous situations.
What are you thinking? You know this. What do
No,
you know how, you actually know how the movie ends.
Yeah.
Like it's like you're watching that same movie, just different
characters.
It's just the same characters, just different people playing the two characters or three characters.
Yeah.
And you know exactly how the movie ends every time. So if you know that, what compels you to go through it again? Is it like a...
Have you ever watched Fight Club?
Yes.
Or Braveheart or The Matrix? Did you watch them more than once? Did you watch them a couple times?
Many times.
Many times, right? Many times. And you enjoyed that movie many times.
Absolutely.
You went back even though you knew what was going to happen.
Absolutely.
Those performances are awesome. The surprises, the
freedom.
Yeah, exactly. But you see it through a new angle, right? It's like even like Fight Club, like there's all these little, what are they called? The Easter eggs, kind of like of what's going to happen. The nuggets, right? It's like you're going for the nuggets, man. Like it doesn't matter if you know the story. It doesn't matter if you've read it or seen it before. And I think like that's when I realized I was like, oh no, this is fucked. Like this is a real problem because I'm just like, it happened twice more after the accident with people that, again, just like were rad and like I could have been very happy with, and being like, what am I doing? This is so like, I'm too old to be doing this. I'm too wise to be doing this. I'm not a bad person. Why am I doing things that are ostensibly bad? And that shame spiral. Well, just remember, so there's the backstory is the wound, that is the shame spiral, that is the wound that keeps getting the scab pulled, that's getting deeper because the shame is digging into it. And for me, it was like I got into a situation I actually got to a point where I was like, okay, I have to change my behavior. So I'm going to be brutally honest with everybody I meet. And my partner now, who I very much adore, and we have a beautiful son together, and we're not married, but we are very much in love and committed. I met her and I was like, hey, I'm a disaster. I am a love addict. I love being single. I want to hook up with a bunch of people. I don't want to be in a committed relationship. And she was like, I am in the midst of a divorce. I'm in the same place. I was like, cool. So we can be friends. We can see if we want to hook up. If we hook up, we can do it protected so that we know that there's nothing weird, because I'm going to be hooking up with other people. And we got into the relationship. We were like best friends for 6 months. And then we were like, oh, we're not hooking up with anybody else. Should we start having unprotected sex? And she was like, well, yes, but only if you tell me if you're going to have unprotected sex or with anybody else. And I'm like, okay, cool. And we did that for a while. And then met this woman who I kind of fell madly in love with and I'd had a crush on for a long time. And I told her, I was like, hey, we need to stop having sex. And it was hard for me to tell her that, but I was like, I'm going to hook up with this other person. Actually, there was some overlap there, to be totally honest. So like, there was the time where I didn't tell her that I was going to hook up with this other person. I did hook up with the other person. Then I came back and told her so that we didn't hook up after the fact. You know what I mean? I was integrity while being out of integrity. And, that was very hurtful for her because we had a deep connection and loved each other, but she got it. And I shouldn't say, but she got it. It was a struggle. It was very hard to accept. It was very upsetting, but also I think helped to explain my like irrational behavior. And what happened there, which I think was really telling, is I'd been going through this struggle of like, dude, I promised I wouldn't do this. I'm being honest to everybody. I'm like over communicating where I'm at, what I'm struggling with, what my desires are. Like I'm actually sharing more than you would logically ever share to try and avoid hurting somebody. And then I'm still hurting this person. And it was this kind of like, okay, well, so pain is part of and suffering is part of the human condition. Like I think so much of my bad behavior came from my fear of wounding somebody else or, you know, like I would,
like if you think about it, let's go back full circle to where it started, where you talked about the abandonment issues and the trauma that you suffered, and the hurt that you suffered. And the irony of it is that what you experienced as a child, it's like you've put through all these other people through similar sort of hurt and abandonment
while trying to keep them from it. You're making it worse.
Inflicting something on them that was inflicted on you, and you're coming from a place of like, oh, this is exactly what I don't want to do, but effectively it is what you are doing.
And because you're not being candid, you're not being in your integrity of like your authentic truth. And I think like that's kind of what I came to, and what Nisa, my partner now, really helped to impart was like, just be honest. Like, even if it's going to hurt me, even if it's going to fuck shit up, even if you're going to lose me as a result, that's better than living in this weird world that you're creating where you're having to keep all the storylines of different lies. Because it just became like a bunch of different lies, which is fucking exhausting and horrible. And so I kind of told her it was a mess. She was very upset. It was Christmas. We were like supposed to spend it together. And I'm alone yet again on another Christmas. And I'm like, what am I doing with myself? And she came back and she was like, you know what? You tried this whole time. You tried. I know you tried. I saw you try to be super honest, to tell me exactly where you were at, to do the hard thing. And even if you failed, which you did, I saw you try over and over again to tell me where you were at, to make me aware of what was going on. And I don't know if I want to be with you, but I love you for who you are. And I see that so much of the people so much of like the affection and care I was getting from women was because they wanted me, right? Like the validation part of this was so vital. We talk about the wound, but like the wound that was being filled by the validation of being loved by a beautiful, awesome woman. That was what I was searching for, that I came to. It was like the validation and the acceptance. And for me, her accepting and validating me without that, fully in my shame spiral, knowing all the things, enabled me to like love her unconditionally in this way that slowly, I mean, it took some time, but it like reconfigured and helped to heal the wound. It like stitched it up, where I was like, oh, like I can be done with this because I can be loved unconditionally. And that unconditional love is, I think, what a lot of sex and love addicts are looking for. The love addicts, I'll speak for love addicts, are really, really looking for. It's like the wound that is being healed is through the validation of unconditional love. And that shifted everything for me. Like I haven't cheated. I haven't, all the relationships that were long-standing weird things that were like on the periphery that I could return to, that I knew I could text or call and fly somewhere and turn back on. I completely cut ties and blocked all those things. I removed. And then I felt more and more in my kind of sacred vessel and in my truth. And it just, I think in the last 2 years, because it's been 2 years since then, or a little more than that. Yeah, the wound, and therapy helps too, and all the rest. But
Yeah,
just like living in,
how often are you doing therapy?
I was doing it once a week, and now I'm doing it once every 2 weeks. And I think it's been super, super helpful. And obviously, even just in this conversation, like I'm being candid about it because it's like if you don't share it and people aren't aware that it's not necessarily common, but like something in us, I don't think it's behooving anybody. I think like we all make mistakes. And I've been a very good person in many aspects of my life. I show up a lot and love really hard. And I don't think I wouldn't say I've like I don't have like malicious intent in me, despite being a dumb fuck and living out of integrity sometimes. And yeah, I think like just leaning into and reiterating the healthy habits and behaviors is the thing that's really in my new relationship helped to lock things in. And there's, it's like, it's not as sexually vibrant. It's not maybe as dramatic, but like that core love that's unconditional is enough to make all the rest fall away. You realize that's, I think as humans, what we're all really striving to create in our lives is just like a healthy, unconditional love.
So you're saying you believe in the concept of unconditional love. A lot of people say the only unconditional love is you can guarantee is like from a dog, for example.
Or towards your child. I feel unconditional love, selfless love towards my child as well. But it's funny, I don't necessarily feel it as much towards like animals. I actually feel a lot of unconditional love for humanity. Like in my core, and I think that's what enabled me to love so much. Like I am a lover of like, I don't actually have a lot of judgment usually. I get tired of people being dumb or ineffective. But generally speaking, I kind of love everybody. And I think the true nature of love is when it's unconditional, right? It's like the genesis. It's like the core energy of our universe and life is this unconditional love. So coming back to that and receiving it from like a badass, powerful, embodied woman was for me, like I broke, dude. When she came back, I forgot that part of the story here. I literally, man, I don't think I've ever cried harder in my entire life than feeling that unconditional love from her, because it broke that child in me that it felt so unloved, right? And those tears were so healing and kind of like began the foundation of a new life, more than being made of titanium and spending 6 months in a fucking chair, more than all the dumb, anguish that I'd caused on both sides. It was like, oh, like this unconditional love is the life force stuff.
Wow. You've lived, I think you've lived the life of multiple men.
I've definitely been the fool enough to fill a cup for sure.
Thank you. Before we finish, I mean, this is a wild story. It's you're definitely my first exposure to the space of love addiction, but like it sent me down the rabbit hole, and I think, yeah, very, very powerful stuff. I ask my guests a set of 5 questions at the end of every show, so I'm going to just jump into that, and then we'll wrap it up. So, given your history, who would you like to say sorry to, given the chance?
Ooh, that's a heavy one. I've sat with that a lot in ceremony, Daniel. I think luckily I've had the chance to say sorry to a bunch of the women in my life that I've made the mistake. But my ex-fiancée, Julia, I was never able to really apologize truly to. Like I tried, but I don't know if she ever really heard it. And then there's basically three people. Julia, it's weird. I don't know if I should use real names or not, but
Don't use real names. You don't need to.
yeah. So well, you can black it out or something, but three women in particular that I really, truly loved and cared about and never was able, you know how like you want to be able to say the things or you write them down and you share them, but it's never really complete because it didn't come from you directly. And the reason I say that is because like all we shared was deep and unconditional love. Like, and I got so much experience and healing and reciprocated life force through that relationship. And it was such a good, healthy thing until it wasn't. I regret not doing a better job of closing those doors so that they were healed and healthy enough to go find the right partner that they deserve, which I was not able to be.
What are you proud of being or doing in your life?
I'm proud of the ways that I've showed up for people in times of struggle or hardship. I'm like a quixotic and relatively brave human that will run into the fire. And I'm proud of myself for the times I've done that. I'm proud of myself for this latest film that I've made that is like that you actually helped to create, which is like an act of selfless, what would you call that? Like a desire to literally just help humanity. And for all the little, I think, there's a lot of times to be good. There's this quote in the movie of like, now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good. It's an old Steinbeck quote from the end of East of Eden. And that really resonates with me. I think we get so caught up these days in trying to be perfect or portraying a life that is perfect. And I think we give a lot up in that pursuit. And in reality, it's just about being good. It's about slowing down enough to like treat others with care and compassion, to like doing the thing that's uncomfortable and difficult because you should and you can. So yeah, the times I've done that, I would say.
When did you receive kindness while needing it most and expecting it least?
With this latest relationship of being unconditionally loved despite my shitty behaviors, and the relationship that came before it with the person who took care of me when I was hurt and just showing up with so much love and compassion. And I think when people are really struggling and that selfless act of showing up for each other is a real gift.
Yep. What did your mother or father teach you that you frequently remind yourself of?
That's a funny one because it's like so much of that wound is from what I was taught as a child. I think that it's okay to be human, and that as long as we're doing the best we know how, just keep leaning into living your truth.
And finally, Raul, what's your
superpower?
Besides giving love, what's your superpower?
That's a fun one. I would say I do have an innate ability to like deductively reason. I think it's what makes me a good director and a good problem solver. Is like I see. I think my superpower is literally like I'll get visions of things that I don't know how to describe them other than visions, but like I can see a future that then, because of my like audacity and ridiculous behavior, I can create. And I think like I feel very lucky to have had a human experience wherein what I can imagine, I have
You can realize into reality.
yeah. And like that vision, that ability to envision feels like a superpower.
Raul, thank you so much.
Dude, thanks for having me, buddy. I appreciate so much our connection and friendship and the opportunity to talk about something that's actually very uncomfortable, but I'm glad I didn't cry or get upset. It felt very grounded in that.
Fantastic job.
Thanks, buddy.
That's it for this episode of Men's Anonymous. Thank you for listening. For more information on the Men's Anonymous podcast, including resources discussed in the show, visit mensanonymous.com. Join us next time as host Daniel Weinberg provides a non-judgmental space for men to voice their innermost feelings and thoughts.